Okay. So can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. This is me again, Dr. Samah, and this is AA100A. And today marks the end of our activities, whether the regular classes or the revision classes. We've been conducting revision classes for the past 2 weeks. We have already covered 3 classes, revision classes. And today, as I said, with today we will end the revision classes and everything. I understand that you have your finals tomorrow, inshallah. I'm hopeful that you found the course interesting and informative, and I'm hopeful that you will do very well on your exams, especially AA100. Okay, so what is it that we're having today? We'll have some kind of review. We're going to go over the rest of the chapters that we haven't gone over as part of our revision project. So what are the chapters that we haven't covered? We have Cezanne, the chapter on Cezanne, the chapter on Plato, the chapter on poetry, and I think this is basically it, because we have already covered 3 chapters. We have covered Cleopatra at one point, and then we had Christopher Marlowe, and then we ended having Ireland yesterday. Okay, so we still have 3 chapters, and we're going to go over them. They are not perhaps as heavy-handed, in your opinion, of course. This is the impression that I got, that you think of all the other chapters. To you or for you, Ireland stands out as the most heavy-handed. So we have done Ireland yesterday. Today, as I said, we still have 3 chapters. We'll go over them very quickly because you have already done them, and I'm sure you have made enough preparation for them, given the fact that the exam is tomorrow. Okay, let me share the revision slides that I have with you. So can you see that? Are the slides visible to you? Can you see them? Yeah, okay. So as I said, we have gone through Cleopatra. We have also done Christopher Marlowe and his Dr. Faustus, of course. And we have done Ireland, the invention of tradition. This also will be yesterday, Ireland. So what is left will be Cezanne, will be Plato on tradition and belief, and would be the poetry part, leading poetry, the Faber book of beasts. As I said, we're not going to be exhaustive about it. Otherwise, what would be the difference between a regular class and a revision class? Revision classes are very concise and to the point, and you don't cover, or you don't expect the teacher to cover everything in a religious and exhaustive way. Because time wouldn't permit, even if we have the desire and the wish to do so. Time wouldn't help. So we're starting with Cezanne, and like we always do, I normally like to kind of elicit information on the figure that will do it. So when I say Cezanne, does the name ring any bells? What are the associations of the name Cezanne? When I say Cezanne now, what comes to your mind? What readily comes to your mind? Go ahead. If you have,
French,
yeah,
art, French artist.
yeah, he's a French artist. That's true. Okay, good. Okay, what else?
He's one of the Impressionists.
He is one of the Impressionists. It's a school. It's an artistic school, a school of painting that is called the Impressionism or the Impressionistic school of painting. Yeah, okay. Okay, what else?
His painting is sold for $60.5 million.
Yeah, this is one of his paintings, which is very ironic
Still life.
and very strange because at the time before he established the fame and the reputation that he had, he was declined and rejected by the Salon. Remember when we spoke about the Salon and its guidelines? And if you follow the guidelines of the Salon, you get accepted and you get recognized. But if you don't follow these rules, you get rejected, and the likelihood that you make it big in the world of painting is very low. Okay, what else? Go on. What else? And what else? Hmm. No more ideas about Cezanne? Are you sure? I'm sure you have lots of ideas, but somehow you're reluctant to share them with us, which is fine. Okay, so and these are the items that we have spoken about at the time when we spoke about Cezanne. What are the basic idea about Cezanne? The basic idea about Cezanne that we're dealing with somebody who also has a contested reputation. Remember, Cezanne is in the book that has its title Reputation. So the overarching theme is still reputation. And we're talking about reputation, I mean, good and bad. Remember when we spoke about Cleopatra, we spoke about those good aspects about her, and we also spoke about those negative aspects according to Roman sources. With Cezanne, we're having the same issue. We're having a celebrity, somebody who is also famous, somebody who people are polarized over. Some people are very much for him, and some other people are against him. So those who would show interest in him and in his paintings would be more of the modernist type, while those who do not think that he made a difference in the world of painting would be the traditionalists, those who believe that he does not observe the guidelines of traditional painting. He doesn't paint in a traditional way, and as such, does not merit the reputation that he has. Okay, so one main idea in the chapter would be the idea of tradition and modernity, and where Cezanne stands between them. Is he a traditionalist or a modernist? And we spoke long and enough about the fact that he was more of a maverick. Maverick is somebody who does stuff in a non-traditional way, in an orthodox way. He is more like Marlowe, if you still remember. He is not traditionalist. He believes that we have enough material and we have enough inspiration in the world that we live in the contemporary world. We have enough, and we don't need to go all the way back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome for inspiration and for material. Um, you need to always understand that at the time, in order for a painter or an artist to make it big in the world of painting, he or she, he for the most part, has to go all the way to ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and also to the Middle Ages, especially with paintings that have a religious streak to them. So you'll have to go back to the past in order to be recognized. If you follow the rules and regulations of traditional painting, paintings that would have their directions towards the past, you pass off as a good painter. If you perhaps rebel against those past trends and you're trying to find your own voice and your own tone, this is not accepted. And this is exactly what happened with Cezanne, if you still remember. There was, at the time, there was annual, conventions and galleries, more like conferences or painting, where you go as a painter and you try your luck. If you follow the guidelines of those conferences, which they and conventions, what they call the salon, if you follow their guidelines, and those guidelines were for the most part traditional, rooted in the past, if you follow their guidelines, you get accepted um, into the world of painting. But if you don't follow the guidelines, and if you write in your own way, you don't get accepted, and you don't have a chance to survive as a painter. You need to perhaps reconsider painting, and you need to think of something else, another career perhaps. So this is the basic idea. We're reading the chapter against or on those principles, the idea of tradition and the idea of modernity, and how far Cezanne was a modernist and how far he was a traditionalist. Like we said, he was never a traditionalist. He was actually opposed to the idea of tradition, and he would believe that tradition would restrict the painter, and the painter is a free soul, a free spirit, and if you're a free spirit, more like a bird, the idea of having tradition binding you and tying you down is not accepted. So he was a maverick. Maverick means that he does things in his own way. So again, he was not accepted in the salon for a number of times. And at one point, he would meet with a number of salon rejectees, people who were also rejected like him, and they would form the school that we now call Impressionism, or the Impressionistic school of painting. Perhaps we need to kind of talk a little about what Impressionism means and what its painters stand for. So again, Impressionism is rooted in modernity, on having your eyes, set on the future rather than on the past. They have their own unique way of painting. Their painting is rough and raw. It's not that. Can you kindly mute your mic? Somebody is having her or his mic on. Please mute your mic. So I'm talking about the Impressionistic school of painting, to which Cezanne at one point would affiliate himself. Of course, he wouldn't stay with them for long because of the fact that they themselves will set their own rules, and uh, um, he doesn't believe in rules when it comes to painting. That's why he would um, over time, distance himself away from them. Again, Impressionism uh, um, um, is a school or a coalition of painters. Those salon rejectees, they got rejected by the um, the jurors of the salon, the judges of the salon. So they would form their own school, and they would paint in their non-conventional way. Again, what is interesting about them would be the idea that the paintings that they produce are not traditional. They are not, um, they don't follow standards. They don't produce artificial paintings. Their paintings are very rooted in whatever is natural, whatever is spontaneous, whatever is instant, and whatever is contemporary. They don't believe in the idea of going all the way back to the past, looking for classical models, whether those models were Greek, Roman, or even medieval. Um, Over time, like I said, Cezanne, because of his rebellious nature, he would find Impressionism very restricting and very limiting. Remember, he was a free spirit. That's why he would cut himself off from them, and he would write in his own way. We have examples of his paintings. Of course, there was this established style of painting that was called nude, and you would go to perhaps Italy in the previous centuries for established models. He would start painting like they used to do, but over time, of course, he would change, and he would have his own way of painting the nudes. At the time, we spoke about that, and we have given examples of those modern nudes. How different are they from classical nudes? They are different. Again, because of the roughness of the painting that Cezanne was producing, the fact that remember the paint brushes and the strokes and how rough they were. They're not smooth. They are very lifelike. They are not artificial. Again, over time, we will have other types of paintings. Um, Cezanne is also known for his still life paintings. Still life uh, are, for the most part, recapturing or capturing still life. I mean, you don't have landscapes, you don't have nudes of human beings. You have, objects that we take for granted in life, like pieces of fruit, for example. And they are being captured in a painting, and they would, impress you as being perhaps didactic in the sense that they give you insights into life and how transient and how short lived life is. The fact that they would point to the vanity of human wishes, if you like. So Cezanne is going to come to his own. He's going to get recognized over the years, and he's going to be very famous. And to the extent that he would be a favorite among artists. So painters would have him as a model that they look up to. What other types of paintings did he produce? He also had landscape paintings, and the influence in this kind of paintings would always go back to his native village. Remember, he was from the south of France. He, at one point, he would go all the way back to the village where he hailed from, where he originated from, and he would have his own studio on a mountain that would give him a panoramic view of the entire village, and that would be inspiration enough for him. He would paint landscape paintings that were also different, that are not classical. The chapter ends with the idea of scholars and owners. Remember, we're talking about a period where there were lots of unrest and revolutions in France and across Europe. And we came to a time when the middle class will take over. And we're talking also about a time when French royalty became no more. So with French royalty, you have patronage of the arts, and you have people who have a heightened sense of art. They have heightened sensibilities when it comes to art. So when the middle class, the bourgeoisie class would take over, they would, they wouldn't show the same enthusiasm for art, of course, and if they do it for perhaps other reasons, reasons other than the appreciation of art. It's not about appreciating as much as it is about posting that they have this and that painting by this and that high and mighty painter. They were not interested in painting for the sake of painting. They were not very much appreciative of the painting experience. They are practical enough. Perhaps they would buy a painting so that and they can keep it so that perhaps over the years it becomes valuable in terms of money, in terms of price, and then they would sell it and resell it. So the idea would purely practical. The idea was purely boastful. The fact that they were kind of posting that they have this or that kind of painting. So those were the what we refer to as owners. You, on the other hand, you would have scholars. Scholars are remnants of perhaps the noble class and people affiliated to the royal court, and also painters and people who studied in good schools where their sensibilities when it comes to art were heightened. So those people obviously did not have enough voice at the time because of the political trends that were available that brought about the bourgeoisie or the middle class. If you ask where Cezanne stands, of course, Cezanne would be among the scholars, and he would be against the owners, those nouveau rich, those who came to wealth and power, but they are not really fans of art for the sake of art. They are fans of art because they want to impress on everybody that they have knowledge of the art and they can appreciate it. But in actual fact, they don't. This is basically what Cezanne is about. Do you guys have any questions about Cezanne?
No.
Okay. Should we move on? Okay. With
Doctor?
the yeah, go ahead.
Doctor, I have a question, but not in just season. I want to ask you about all the chapters we have in final.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
now or after the?
It's up to you. Would you like me to answer you now? It's okay. Go ahead with your question.
Okay. I would like you. I would ask you after you finish because I will ask you all the question I want. Okay.
Okay, okay.
Thank you.
What's your name?
Rina.
Lina.
Okay.
Okay, Lina. Thank you. Okay. So when Cezanne marks the end of book one, and Plato on tradition and belief marks the start of a new book, right? The second book was about tradition and dissent, right? You spoke enough about tradition and you spoke also enough about dissent. Dissent means that you don't accept tradition and you don't accept tradition for, for good reasons. It's not just refusing and rejecting tradition. You dissent from tradition because you think that the way tradition is projected is not correct. The fact that people deal with tradition as if they idolize tradition, they make gods and goddesses and idols out of tradition, which is something that rational people who use their minds, wouldn't accept. So the first individual that we're having in this book on tradition and dissent would be Plato. And of course, you're familiar with Plato from the chapter, from our talk on and about the chapter, and also from your general knowledge. So Plato happens to be an ancient Greek philosopher. Just to remember, we said that he is the pupil of Socrates and he is the mentor of Aristotle. And of course, the three are the most, perhaps the most important Greek philosophers, or ancient Greek philosophers. Each one of them has his own way of, making sense about and of the world. Again, if I say philosophers and if I say philosophy, I mean that we have people who use their mind. They are rationalists. If you're a rationalist, it means that you put everything to the test using your mind. You don't just accept stuff at its face value. You don't just accept things as is. you challenge ideas, you try to deconstruct them and see whether they make sense or not. Now, this is exactly what Plato does. Plato is, Plato is, of course, is all over the place. He spoke about different things, but the part that we're interested in with Plato would be tradition and moral belief. So what is a traditional belief according to the chapter? Traditional belief is, you have a set of beliefs that you have inherited from, the previous generations. You hold them in such a great esteem. You put them on a pedestal. You think highly of those sets of traditions, and you're not likely to change them. You're not likely to even accept people, challenging them. You would say no. These are things, and these are beliefs that we have inherited from the older generations, from our forefathers and fathers, and there is no way these beliefs are wrong. They are correct because of the fact that we inherited them from people that we value very much, and also because of the result that we see on the ground if we apply these beliefs. So there is no way we would come and perhaps challenge them and say they may be correct and they may be wrong. Plato and all the philosophers would say, okay, we're not against traditional beliefs in their entirety. We don't just reject them wholesale. We're going to only reject those traditional beliefs that do not perhaps make sense when we subject them to reason and the power of the intellect. So it's about adopting a revisionist attitude when it comes to dealing with traditional beliefs. Philosophers would say that you'll have to kind of subject those beliefs to reason, and if reason accepts them, that's fine. If reason says that they don't make sense and all, we don't accept. Okay, so the basic idea would be about this conflict and this kind of contrast between moral traditionalism and moral rationalism. So the struggle or the conflict or the competition between whatever is rational and whatever is traditional. Okay, so in order to kind of debate and discuss these things, Plato is going to write a number of treatises, a number of tracts, philosophical tracts, where you would have characters, and those characters are going to be kind of pitted against each other. And out of the conversation, out of the ideas that they talk about and challenge, we get what Plato wants to say. So Plato, as you can see, is not very direct. He's typical of philosophers. He doesn't give you ready-made answers. He needs you to think. He needs you to use your power of reason. In his dialogues and conversations, Plato would rely on the character of Socrates. And Socrates Actually, we have two Socrates. We have the historical Socrates, the very famous philosopher who was the mentor of Plato. And we also have the fictional Socrates, the Socrates that Plato invented in his dialogues and conversations. Okay, so why would we have Socrates? Perhaps Plato, by bringing in Socrates, by inventing the character of Socrates that is similar to the actual Socrates, he was kind of trying to pay tribute to his mentor. Okay, so Socrates is going to be the main protagonist. He will be talking to other people, and out of the conversations, out of the questions that he asks, we get interesting insights and interesting ideas. Socrates in Plato's dialogues has his own way of making sense of things. He doesn't just ask questions and then wait for you to answer them, and if you don't answer, or if you answer in a wrongful way, he gives you the answer. No, he doesn't give answers. He's all the time asking questions, and questions bring in more questions, and he doesn't settle for easy answers. And this sometimes gets on the nerves of the people that he encounters. This is called the Socratic method, and the Socratic method is about asking questions, is about asking further questions when people answer you, is about kind of checking the rationale and the logic behind what people are saying. And people are saying things perhaps from experience, from whatever they heard. Perhaps they are inheriting the answers. He says, no, use your own mind and think of how logical what you're saying is. At the end of the conversation, people would feel disappointed, perhaps would feel that their answers are not the right ones. Again, they would ask Socrates to provide model answers, to which he would say, no, I don't have a model answer. I don't have an answer because, according to him, knowledge is based on experience. And he may have the knowledge, but he doesn't have the experience. So he doesn't know whether what he says is correct or wrong. That's why he refrains away from answering. That's why he doesn't provide answers. He spoke to a number of people, Lagos, if you still remember, and the idea would be about courage and what courage means. He would also have other people joining in. And in whatever intellectual encounters he would use logical arguments. And when we talk about logical arguments, we talk about premises that he gives, and then there is a conclusion that is based on the premises. Again, it's at one point he would perhaps make a difference between knowledge, make a distinction between knowledge and opinion, and he would, of course, he is in favor of. He would say that opinion is normally inherited. You just hear other people say something, and then you parrot them, and this is not enough, obviously. Knowledge is different. So he wants people to uh, be more interested in knowledge. And he would also say that opinion are individualistic, that are normally inherited, and they are not normally correct because they are not tested. So if you have an opinion and this opinion gets tested and gets perhaps practiced on the ground, and it proves correct, it turns from being an opinion into being knowledge. Again, we're using the Socratic method, which is based on the idea of asking questions and asking further questions. We're using that in education, where especially in colleges of law. Whenever you have university that has law schools, they are still using the Socratic method, which depends on the idea of asking questions, which depends on the idea of having logical arguments with premises and conclusions. This is basically what the chapter on Plato is. Do you guys have any questions on that?
No, thank you.
Okay. So let's now move to poetry, reading poetry, the favorite book of beasts. This is recent. This is a chapter that we have done not very far away from now. And that's interesting because we're talking about tradition and descent, but this time around we're talking about moral beliefs. We're not talking about artistic practices. We're talking about poetry practices, and and the chapter, the focus is of course on how far poets can be dissidents. They dissent from the tradition or the traditions of poetry, and whether their dissent is acceptable or not. We'll talk about that. So the context that we're having in order to discuss these issues will be animal poetry. Animal poetry has always been there. It is all over the place. Animal literature has always been there since Greek literature, since ancient Greek literature. We spoke about Aesop, and Aesop happens to be, a Greek literary talent who produced fables, and those fables are stories that have animals having human attributes. So the practice is very old, and we will have that. And we're going to see how far the poets that we have, how far they deviate from tradition or perhaps come close to tradition. Again, we're using an anthology. And of course, you know by now what an anthology is. An anthology is a collection of poems by different poets. You don't have one volume of poems by the same poet. No, you have different poems by different poets. Again, the word anthology is more or less close to the meaning of a bouquet, or the meaning of a collection of flowers, because in the final analysis, the collection of poems is a collection of flowers. Poems are flowers, flowers in the sense that they are sweet and nice and very, they give you melody and they give you this feeling of happiness and fun. Okay, so this is and what we mean by anthology, and the anthology that we have is an anthology of animal poetry. That would bring us to the idea of anthologies and how anthologies are built and made. So anthologies are not just done or made in a random way. There is a great deal of calculation involved in the process of building an anthology. The choice of the poems is very significant. Yeah, they don't just choose any number of poems. There is a rationale and a philosophy behind the choice of this poem over that one. Every anthologist, the one who makes or builds the anthology, every anthologist has his own way of building his or her anthology. He has his own choices, which do not necessarily agree with or coincide with our tastes. You might find the anthologist including poems that you don't like, and you might find him dropping out poems that you like. And in this case, you would perhaps accuse him of being biased towards perhaps women if he doesn't include women, biased towards blacks if he doesn't include black poets, biased towards cultures if he doesn't include non-European poets. So every one of us has his own reason to lash out against the builder of a specific anthology. You'll always find faults with an anthology because the only way that you can be satisfied with an anthology would be that you yourself compile the poems and choose the poems. And of course, we cannot all be anthologists. The traditional way of building anthologies would depend on the idea of chronology, where you start with old poems and then you go all the way to new ones. What is also interesting about anthologies would be the idea that anthologists are very despotic. Despotic means that they are dictatorial in their choices, and they would even listen. They wouldn't even listen when you tell them. You perhaps should have chosen that poet or that poem. They wouldn't listen. They would even feel bad that you are perhaps criticizing them. How about the anthology that we have, the Faber Book of Beasts? It's written by a very famous poet by the name of Milton. So Milton himself is a poet, and that would give credibility to the anthologies that he established or built. But he would still put that disclaimer. He would put a disclaimer saying, "Listen, I'm not different from the other anthologists, in the sense that I'm also dictatorial and despotic in my choices, and nobody imposes their choices on me." He would also refer to the fact that people would ask him why you're not traditional. You're not a traditionalist when it comes to building the Faber Book of Beasts, because your anthology is not um, based on the idea of chronology. It's based on the idea of alphabet. His anthology is alphabetical, and he would say that I'm doing that in order not to give people the wrong impression that I am favoring old poets to new ones. No, all of them are equal to me. That's why I'm starting in a neutral way, and the neutral way that I'm using would be alphabetical order. And then we go to the poems that we have in the anthology. And before we do that, we talk about poetry and how the idea of descent. And we said, and if you still remember, we said that poets, like perhaps singers, they start traditional. You cannot afford not to start traditional as a poet. So when you start off your poetic career, you start as a traditional, and then you establish your own voice, and over time you come up with something new. So all poets start traditional because they would use traditional methods and traditional forms in order for people to recognize them. But if they start new, if they start new forms right from the very beginning, people wouldn't recognize them. They have to establish themselves as traditional poets, and over time they would change. Now, what happens if they are stuck in tradition? They stay traditionalist till the end of their life. People would lose interest in them over time, and they would end up, not known. Not They would fall into oblivion. Nobody would remember them over the years. So again, with poetry, there is nothing wrong with starting off as a traditionalist in the sense that you're using, established forms, you're using established themes and ideas. But over time, when you have enough experience and enough training, you would migrate to your own voice and to your own way of doing things. The poems that we have are we have three poems, and then we also have D.H. Lawrence and his poems. We have William Blake, who wrote The Fly, and then John Donne, The Flea, and Miroslav Holub, The Fly. If you read them in this order, it means that you don't have chronology, because if it's chronological that we're having, we should have started with John Donne, which we didn't. Right? We started with The Fly by William Blake, and if you still remember when we spoke about The Fly, we said that it is rooted in the traditions of nursery rhyme. Nursery rhymes are poems that are addressed to small children, right? What is in terms of ideas, you would find that William Blake is talking or addressing the issue of human transience, the fact that life is very short, and our and no matter how long we live, we have to die at one point. So again, it's about the vanity of human wishes. The poem, if you look at the poem, you're going to find it very short in terms of lines. You would find that he's not a great observer of classical rhyme schemes. The lines are very short, and the diction or the choice of the words are very simple, which is very consistent with the fact that he is addressing his poems to children. Again, on the surface level, you would think that he is addressing children, but when you think about it, when you give it further thought, you would feel that it is also addressed to mature and people who have mature people and people who have experience. Because again, he would talk about how similar the fly is to human beings. The fact that in the face of fate, whether we are animals or insects or human beings, we are nothing. We are mere flies in the hands of powers and forces beyond our control. So the heavy hand of fate can deal us a blow, and our life can come to an end at any time. So no matter how big we think we are, no matter how important we think we are mere flies. We are exactly like flies that can be beaten down or smashed by a blind hand at any point and at any moment. Again, we move to John Donne, and with John Donne, we have The Flea. The Flea is a poem, and it belongs to the traditions of metaphysical poetry. Metaphysical poetry is this kind of poetry that was very popular during the Elizabethan and age and after. And the focus with John Donne would be on the idea of bringing reconciling whatever is irreconcilable, if you like. I mean, his images are very far-fetched, and they are sometimes hard to get and understand. That's why we call them conceits. So he is famous for his metaphysical conceits. So what is the predominant conceit in the poem The Flea? You would find the fact that the idea that the blood of the lover and the lady that he is trying to woo or trying to attract, their bloods are, somehow now part of the blood of the flea. The flea sucks their blood, and somehow we have this mixture of bloods, and this is one way of telling the lady that he loves that they are now one, and in the process he would invite her to forget about tradition, to forget about morality, to forget about even religion. He said that it so happened that we are now one and the same on account of the flea sucking our bloods. The image is very far-fetched. The image is very strange. How far is John Donne traditionalist, and how far he is dissenting from the traditions of perhaps romantic or love poetry? Of course, as you can see, he is very revolutionary in the way that he addresses love poetry. Love poetry at the time was all about it was courtly love poetry, where you normally have decency, you have the poet trying everything he can in order to, in order to appeal to his lady love. He would try everything. He would, humble down and perhaps humiliate himself in order to perhaps receive a smile or a wink or a date. But to have this image that John Donne was creating, this is of course anti-traditional. Okay. If you compare the fly to the flea, you're going to find worlds of difference. The flea is written in, you know, there is nothing revolutionary about its form. It's classical in form. You have long lines, you have poetic diction, you have diction that is used especially for poetry. Again, the revolutionary part, the non-traditional part, the dissenting part would have to do with the idea and with the idea of the conceit. I mean, reconciling two irreconcilable things. And then we move to Miroslav Holub and his fly. Miroslav Holub is a contemporary poet. He is not, of course, English or American. He is from perhaps the Czech Republic, or what used to be the Czech Republic. And the poem here, excuse me, is not also a traditional poem. Not a traditional poem in the sense that it doesn't have rhyme, and also it doesn't have rhythm. For the simple reason that this is a translation. This is not the original poem. This is not the poem in its original language. It is a translated version of the poem, and of course that will bring us to the idea of translation and whether verse and poetry is translatable or not. Again, when you translate poetry, the rhyme and the music is lost. Again, what is left would be the ideas, and the ideas that we have is of a fly, having a panoramic view of a scene of war, a battle. There was this battle, and the fly is bearing witness. Again, the poem is different. Normally, whenever you talk about war poems, you normally have the poet glorifying heroes and talking in epic terms about their deeds and what they did in the battle and everything. Look at Homer and his epics, the Odyssey and the Iliad, for example. So obviously, Miroslav Holub is deviating from the norms of war poems. There is nothing epic about his poem. He is reporting what is happening. You get the feeling that we have somebody, perhaps the fly, holding a camera and is reporting very objectively what is happening in this battlefield, where you have a great deal of violence, you have a great deal of bloodshed and killing, where you have horses being disemboweled, you have people killed. So it's an objective description which is not consistent with the traditions of war poetry and epics. There is nothing epic about it, as I said. It's very scientific in its reporting of what happened. I mean, the writer is, or the poet is not taking sides, as is always the case. He is pointing to the brutality of wars, but in an objective way. He doesn't make statements. Okay. This is basically what Holub's poem is about. And then we move all the way to D.H. Lawrence, and we look at him and see whether he is a poetic dissident or not, whether he is dissenting or not. We have taken 5 poems, if you still remember. I think I have them. The 5 poems of Lawrence were Mountain Lion, Lizard, Bat, Turtle, and Snake. And as you can see, they all share the idea that they are animals and insects. What is interesting about D.H. Lawrence would be the idea that he was also a maverick in the sense that he is also um, dissenting from the poetic norms, dissenting in both form and meaning and themes and ideas. In terms of forms, you would find him using free verse. Free verse means that he doesn't stick to certain rhyme schemes, and he doesn't stick to rhythms and meters. And he is also very shocking and very challenging in his themes. You need to only remember that when he talks about animals, he would put them on such a pedestal and he would refer to them in very glorious terms, and he would always compare them to human beings, to the total, neglect of human beings. He would say bad stuff about human beings when it comes to comparing them to animals. He would be very scornful of human beings and their education. He would be very disgusted at human beings and what they do, and he would bring out those bad qualities about human beings, the idea of treason and betrayal, the idea of perhaps greed, having they want to build their happiness at the expense of other creatures. So he was very uh, unconventional when it comes to dealing with human beings in his poems. He is always favoring animals to or over human beings. I'm done. Okay. So if you have any questions, go ahead.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Yes, an anthology of Malden. He states that his purpose is to present selection of the best animal poems in English-speaking tradition. Does that mean that all of the poems that included in his anthology are tradition? Because H.D. Lawrence is not يعني he didn't use tradition devices in his poems. So
No,
what that mean?
not all of the poems that we have in the anthology are traditional, and not all of them are, they are not all descending from tradition. So if you look, for example, at Don's poem, it's partly traditional in its form and partly non-traditional in its ideas. The idea of reconciling irreconcilable ideas. The idea of the far-fetched metaphysical conceit. This is not very traditional, especially when you talk about courtly love poetry. Love poetry where you normally have a traditional individual. I mean, somebody who is trying to court his lady love in a decent way. This is not happening in the D.H. Lawrence, of course, as you can see, is very non-traditional. He is a challenger of tradition, the poetic traditions, when it comes to whether we're talking about form or we're talking about meaning and ideas. So not all of them are traditional, and not all of them are non-traditional. And we even spoke about the idea that even the anthology itself in its building is non-traditional and is deviating from the norms of traditional anthology building in the sense that it is not arranged in a chronological way. It is rather arranged in an alphabetical way, and of course for good reasons, like Meldon said. He said that I'm doing that in order not to give readers the impression that I am favoring the old over the new. Okay. Somebody else?
Okay, thank you. I have another question.
Okay. What's your name, by the way?
My name's Susan.
You're Susan. Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead, Susan.
And the flea for John Donne, is it it can consider as or considered as the anthropomorphic poem? And what's the evidence if it's yes?
Yeah, it has elements. All of them perhaps have anthropomorphic elements and features to them. If you have a flea or a fly that has features and attributes of human beings, this is very anthropomorphic. And we're having that in the flea. I mean, the flea is presented as being calculating, and who calculates? It's a human being calculating so that it can mingle the blood of the two individuals, and they end up, being one in within the blood of the flea. I mean, addressing the flea and talking about the flea and giving it human attributes would make it very anthropomorphic, yes. Hello.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, what is the common features of the all poems that included in Modern Anthology? Is it the description between or the comparison between animal and human?
Yeah, for the most part, it's about that. It's for the most part, they are very anthropomorphic. They, I mean, the poems stress the fact that we're having animals who are sometimes rational. They think better than human beings, especially if you talk about D.H. Lawrence and his poems and the appreciation that he has for animals over human beings. So the idea of anthropomorphology is, I mean, features very prominently in the poems. And also, most of them have this idea that human beings, no matter how hard they try, human beings, no matter how big they think they are fallible. They make errors and mistakes, and they are also vulnerable. Vulnerable in the sense that they can die anytime. They can, I mean, their life can come to an end very easily. They are compared to flies, and they are compared to other small insects, and that would show how insignificant human beings are. It's all about the insignificance of human beings if you compare them to elements of nature. And they have to come to this realization. The poems are all about this realization that we fail to sometimes come to as human beings.
Okay, thank you so much, dude.
You're welcome. Any more questions?
Teacher?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to ask, how does D.H. Lawrence take descending on the human life in his poem?
If I understood the question correctly, you're trying to say
D.H. Lawrence.
Yeah, you're focusing on D.H. Lawrence and you're trying to see whether he is dissenting when it comes to presenting human beings in his poems. Yeah,
Yes.
dissenting in the sense that normally when you have human beings featured in poems, you normally talk about them in positive terms, right? You glorify people, whether they are heroes or even ordinary people. But with D.H. Lawrence, you have somebody who is lashing out and who is attacking human beings, describing them as disgusting, describing them as not, a million human being, according to D.H. Lawrence in Mountain Lion, is worth one mountain lion. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
So he's describing human being as being despicable, as being nothing, as being bad, greedy, and all those bad qualities. But this is, of course, deviating from the norms. You normally present human beings in positive lights, especially if you talk about animals, and if you're comparing them to animals. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Deep.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Anyone? Everyone?
No, thank you, Doctor.
Okay. Right. Well, somebody's raising their hand. Go ahead, Ines. Is it Ines that we're?
No, not me.
Okay. Anybody else? So obviously.
No, thank you.
Okay. On this note and with this item, we come to the end of today's class and today's revision and the end of the revision series that we have started a couple of weeks ago. Thank you so much. It was very nice meeting you. It has been a real pleasure teaching you all. And I wish you all the best tomorrow in your final exam. And I would like you to make me proud. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you
Nice to
so
meet
much.
you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice. The pleasure is mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Please, Doctor, be careful when you put the mics.
Inshallah.